All right. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for What's New in Leap 8.0. We are officially scheduled to upgrade to Leap 8.0 on Monday, March 23rd at 10 p.m. So it's great to see you all coming on ahead of time to learn what's going on with this new update. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Kiara Lyons, and here with me is Rachel Fisher, and we are the CCS Member Services Specialists. In today's session, I will begin by reviewing and demoing the new LEAP 8.0 features for public services, and then Rachel will jump in to review the new features for technical services. After each section, there will be time to get answers to any questions you may have, but please don't hesitate to drop questions or concerns in the chat as we demo. We will try to answer as we go, and we will definitely catch up on everything at the end. So just taking a peek at the chat, I don't see any questions just yet, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into reviewing those new features for public services. So for all of these updates, I will first begin by just giving a brief description of how the functionality has changed and how it'll work moving forward, and then I'll jump into demoing what it looks like in Training Leap. So first up, we have a change in the display shelf location processing. So Polaris introduced this new display processing option, which will allow you to mark a shelf as a temporary display location. The idea behind this is that you'll have items you'll want to place temporarily on display, like if you're creating a spring display. You will create a shelf location for that display area so that patrons can locate their book if they're looking in the catalog. And then once the patron locates the item, goes to this display, they will be able to take it off, check it out without staff intervention, which has not been true prior to this upgrade. And then they will be able to go on their way. And once they return the item again, it'll check back in and automatically go back to what's called the original shelf location. So I'm going to hop off of my PowerPoint and I'd like to demo that for you. So let's say your staff know that they want a specific location set as display. So again, I'm going to use that spring example. Let's say you are creating a youth spring display, and you would like to add Little Blue Truck Springtime to that display. You will open a ticket with CCS and let us know to create a shelf location if it doesn't already exist for your library. Then you will go to the item record and click on this Details tab. And as we can see, the original shelf location here is called Children's Picture Book. But I'm going to open up and look for my spring display shelf location, and I'll choose it. And then on the back end, CCS has set up this specific shelf location as a display per your request. So I will go ahead and in the item record, now that I've made that change, I will select Save. Now that we've saved our shelf location, we will see that this is now shelf location listed as spring display. When the patron comes to your library, is checking out your beautiful spring display, and decides they want to check this item out, you'll go ahead and check it out to them. And we will see that Little Blue Truck Springtime has been checked out to this patron. They take it with them, they're enjoying this book, I'm going to close out of everything, and now they've returned it. When they return this item, we will see that the shelf location is spring display. Once it's returned to the item and checked in, ooh, I should have been logged into display to Algonquin, I'm sorry. But once you change it, it will change back to the original shelf location of Children's. I'm going to go jump into Algonquin so that you can see how that should look. I apologize. All right. Once the item is back to Algonquin, it'll be checked out, checked back in, and this will change the shelf location Children's Picture Books. meaning that staff will no longer have to go and automatic or manually change that into the original shelf location. Again, this is different from what we've seen before, before it stays on that display, before it has needed staff intervention in order to check out to patrons, so patrons haven't been able to check out on the self-check. Now that won't be a problem. All right, I did a little hopping around, so I want to pause and make sure there aren't any questions about how this will work.
Is this Karen from Fremont?
Hi, Karen.
If you have multiple items that you want on this display shelf or whatever, can a record set be created then that will automatically change those to that new shelf location?
That is a great question. While Rachel is doing her part, oh, Rachel, do you know the answer to this?
No, but I was just going to say there's another question in the chat once you were done.
Okay. Karen, I'm going to test while Rachel is doing her section, and then I'll pop an answer in the chat for you. That is a great
Okay.
question. So can we create a record set? Got it. All right. Let's see the other question.
Michelle is asking, what if we want the item to stay in the display location?
That is also a question that I've had, Michelle. It's not in the documentation, but I'll open a ticket with Innovative to make sure that that's something we can do. Because right now, the way that it's set up is as soon as it's checked back in, it's going to go back to the original location. Sorry to not have an answer for you on that just yet.
The next question from Kim is, how long does the temporary shelf location last?
So similar question, it's going to be returned to the original shelf location once it's checked back in. Ideally, we have patrons checking things out for a while, and once they return it, it'll be checked back to the original. Hopefully, the display is gone, but also, the setting right now doesn't show us how long it will last, so I'll go ahead and see if there's a way to set something for a period of time so that when it's checked back in, it still goes back to display. That's a great question.
It's another question. Julie Z at Crystal Lake asks, after this meeting, could you please send out a sample ticket that shows the language we should use to make this request?
Yes.
It's a great question.
That is a great question. Just so that I share it out right now, and I'll also send an email, all you need to do is if you're creating a new shelf location, you say, can I get a shelf location titled Spring Display? And then can you also make this shelf location a display, a temporary display? I'll send an email out so you have that documented as well. Kim, going back to Zion's question from Kim, the item will stay on the shelf, on that display shelf location until it's checked back in. So if it sits there, it's going to sit there for a while until you check it off of the spring display. Yes.
Another question from Nancy.
Go ahead, Rachel.
You can read it if you want.
Once we are done with the spring display, can we just check them all in, even though they're not checked out, to remove the temporary location? Nancy, that is correct. Any other questions? I'll give just another 30 seconds. Make sure if you need to type something. Also, please feel free to hop off mute and share with us if you have any questions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the next feature. So we have the dated patron notes, which staff can now enter. Ooh, I'm going to pause just to see if there's one more question.
Yes, there's one more question from Nancy. Do you know how temporary location will affect my locations-based reports?
That is a great question. I will connect with Bob and let you know what that difference is going to look like.
There's another question from the net. What kind of permissions do you need to change the locations?
This will be. I'll double check for you. Dana, that's a great question. And I will, while Rachel's doing her demos, I will go ahead and find answers to the questions I didn't have answers to and throw them in the chat, okay? I'm not sure which specific permissions will be needed. My guess would be item record changes, but I'll confirm with us. I also want to show you one thing before I hop off because that question triggered another feature here is that I want to show you that in the history tab, you will be able to see that the display process was modified. So if you ever have questions about who did make that change or who checked it in or who set it up, you'll be able to see the username of the staff member that made that display change. So it's the modified via display processing. So just something to keep in mind. Okay. In terms of modif this display processing feature, I have a couple questions to touch base on, and I will drop the questions in the chat, or the answers in the chat. As of right now, is there anything else I can help answer?
There's another question from Nancy. What libraries have been using the display locations?
If you are on here and you're a library that uses the current display location features, let us know. One of the things that has been a struggle with the current display features is that it blocks patrons from checking out. It self-checks. It requires manual intervention from staff, and this new display feature will not prevent patrons from checking out at self-checks. Palatine uses this display settings for adult displays, but not youth. All right. If your library uses display settings, please go ahead and pop them in the chat. Round Lake Library uses display. All right. As you're typing those, I'm going to go ahead and jump into dated patron notes. Please feel free to keep sending questions, and after my section is all done, I will go ahead and connect with those other questions. All right. So the next change is the addition of a dated patron note field. We now have the option to add dated notes in the patron record. This is a separate field from the classic previous notes field. This new dated note serves more like a log, and staff usernames that create the note will show up. So you'll see staff usernames, the branch that the staff was logged into, and the creation date will all be documented. So hopping back to my training leap, I'm going to close out of my pages and search for Kiara Test 2. And I am now on my patron account. I am going to go ahead and see that we have the original blocks, the original notes. And if I scroll down, we now have this dated notes feature, which is a little hidden. You do have to click the more drop down and find it here. All right, so like I shared before, this note field is where staff um, can add notes that will be tracked as a free text note. You'll see the creator's name, the branch that they were logged in when they created. So this will be your branch, and then the creation date. Some differences from what we're used to with the other note features is that once you've added a dated note, you can't edit it. So if I'm trying to click on it like the other ones, I can't open it and I can't edit. However, you can delete the whole note once it's no longer relevant. So you can go ahead and select it and press delete. This functionality is also limited to certain permission groups, so all your staff will have the opportunity or the ability to view or add a data note, but that would be up to like the library moving forward. Lastly, data notes do not pop up like the other notes field do. They're not hard blocking notes, so when you're checking in and out for patrons, you will not see these notes. So it's something that you will have to go into this page and proactively check. We have had a meeting with the circulation ILL advisory group to try to determine how we're going to use these notes. And then next month, we'll take this with the CERC tech group to discuss the next steps of procedures. So wait on like making decisions for your library just because we are going to see if this is something that we want to create procedures towards. So stay tuned for that, but feel free to test if you're interested in testing in Training Leap. Go ahead and open a ticket and just let me know, and I will give you permissions to do this. As a reminder, this is based by permission. So you could give your staff permission to just view data notes. You give permission to your staff to add data notes, and you can give permission to delete. So those are three different permissions that you can assign. I saw a comment. Do you know the reason for this notes? Michelle, right now, we were hoping to be able to use it as a replacement for some of the other notes, but talking to Circ ILL, we decided that doesn't really do what we want it to do enough to replace our blocks or our notes field. So as of right now, we think that these will just be used for more information based rather than action based. So like if a patron goes through the NCOA process, or if they had fines and fees purged, this might be a good place for this to live. I think that Leap's goal was to provide us with a log where we didn't have to, like when you put in a note for non-blocking and blocking, we ask staff to add their initials and the date that they put it. I think the goal for this was to s- make this a little easier. It already tells you the creator, it tells you the date, but it doesn't really do everything we need it to do for it to replace the regular note section. So I have a question that says, please explain who can view the notes. And the notes are viewed by permission base. So if you want your staff to see the notes, you can give them permission. If not, they will still see this tab, but they will have that pop-up that says, please enter your manager's credentials to be able to see the notes. If you want them to be able to see the notes but not edit or delete, or not add or delete, you can give them that permission. If you would like them to be able to view the notes, add a note but not delete a note, you can give them those permissions. So those three permissions are separate, and you can determine that by your staff. Carmen is asking, can you click on one to see what it has? You cannot. So these will not open up. It will not give you additional details. If you click on it, you can delete it. And then you can also add a note, add, test, note. They're all free text, and you can go ahead and add. Carmen, let me know if that answers your question. Yes, perfect. More questions about data notes. There is not a character limit to these notes, which makes it a little bit nicer because we know that we do have a character limit to these non-blocking notes, blocking notes. That's why we're considering making this area NCOA and other like information based, because then it's not taking up the limit that we do have in these spaces. There's also not, as of right now, we don't know if there's a limit. We haven't been told, so I'm going to say no limit on the amount of notes a patron can have here. Yeah, so Michelle's saying maybe these new notes could be an archive notes for patron with lots of notes. That is also something that the Circ ILL group discussed. It's a great idea. More questions about notes. All right. Again, we will discuss this with the Circ technical group. We'll share the Circ ILL's advisory recommendation on this section, and we will share out how we see this data notes field working for CCS moving forward. All right, I am going to jump in. All right, so lastly, we have the new Director Printer setting. This feature, we can update receipt printer settings by workstation, making it that much easier to receipt and label print. With the direct to printer settings, you can print directly from Leap without having to go through that browser printer up page, pop-up page every time you're printing receipts, labels, or slips. For this to work, IT must download the QZ tray. It's linked in this PowerPoint, so we'll share it out and you'll have the link. Then CCS can confirm workstations as requested and follow up with your IT team to have instructions on how to configure on the Leap side. But I do want to show you how this works in Leap. So from your homepage, you will go ahead and click on your name and select Settings. And in your settings, we have these tabs. This new one is now the Direct to Printer tab. I will select this Direct to Printer and we will get the settings to set up. Again, your IT will likely set this up with you. Basically, what you're going to do is connect to a host. I don't have a printer to connect to, but if I were to have a printer, we would go ahead and click connect, and then we would select receipts and slips, letting our Leap know that we would like to use direct to printer for any receipts and slips. We would select our printer name, and then if we would like to make a change to our receipt printer margins, you can do that here. And similarly, if you want to print labels directly from Leap, you would click Labels, select the printer name, and make any margin changes. One thing to note is that this is only for receipts, slips, and labels. Everything else will still have that pop-up from the browser to print. And this is optional. So if you don't want to use this, you don't have to. You can continue working with your printer as you have been. Take a pause. Rachel will also go over this in her section. So if you want a refresher, that'll be there. But I'm going to take a second to see. Great question. This can be used in conjunction with the regular setting, especially since your regular settings are going to continue for like when you're printing bills and hold requests and those types of things. When you're printing like actual. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Again, totally optional. So if you try it and you decide not to like it, you don't have to use it. Okay. I will be working on finding answers to some of those other questions. If you continue to have questions about this public services section, send them in the chat and I will work on answering those too. I'm going to wrap up here and pass it over to Rachel.
Okay, great. 1 second, I will share my screen. Okay, does everyone see my PowerPoint?
We can see it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be providing an overview of the most important features added to Leap for cataloging and acquisitions. So hopefully you won't get too bored today because I won't be going too in depth if you're public services staff and you're waiting for Kiara to get answers. But some of these may still interest you anyway. So I'm doing more of a brief demonstration because there are so many new features that I'm just doing an introduction today, but then I'm having two separate webinars to go more in depth so that I can demonstrate the new features within the full workflow, and having them done separately as the cataloging session and an acquisition session so the staff can choose which one to go to. This will be in the end of March. So I've already sent out the instructions for how to register for those in L2. If you have any questions, let me know. So for those of you that are using Leap to catalog already, you may feel that you need to go back to the client a lot less with this upgrade. So hopefully you'll like some of these new features. the new direct to printer settings for label printing that Kiara just demonstrated may be useful to you if you've been having some issues with printing labels in Leap. So this is supposed to improve the quality of the label printing by allowing you to customize that printer's margin setting that you may have just seen. So these settings can also be used for receipt printers. For those of you that have been disappointed when you migrated to Polaris by the fact that it was missing the ability to push MARC records from OCLC connection to Polaris without having to download that import file and import it into MARC import, this functionality is coming with the version 8.0 upgrade. So we're currently working on testing this, and I'm not ready to demonstrate that yet. Hopefully that will be ready for March. We're still working on getting that set up properly. The ability to create and edit bibliographic record templates has also been added. This is one that will be useful to both the cataloging and acquisition staff. Additionally, the ability to create and edit import profiles has been added to Leap. So for those of you that do need to change the item template of that item records tab in the import profile, you can now do it in Leap. I don't know if there are many of you that are doing that still. I know we've had some libraries doing that in the past. So you won't have to make that change in the client anymore because you can do that in Leap now. So I'm going to switch to demonstrating in Leap so I can review all of those features that I just spoke about for cataloging and take any questions before moving on to acquisitions. So I know Kiara just reviewed the settings for the direct to print on the direct to printer settings. So just wanted to come back to that for a second. And because it does require you to download a program called QZ Tray to set this up. We do have resources in the slides, on one of our slides for QZ Tray. And there's a link to download it. However, there have already been some limitations for the label printing that have been discovered and have been reported in a webinar. So I have a link to that in this slide. And I'll be reviewing that a bit more in the cataloging webinar. So the next feature that I mentioned is the ability to create, copy, and edit the bibliographic record templates. So if you want to create them from scratch, you can now do that from the new drop-down menu. You click on New, hover over Template, and click on Bibliographic Record. I know most of you already have all of your templates set up and would just be mostly copying anything if you need to create a new one. But just so you get a look at this, it looks just like the MARC editor in Leap. It has the same functions as the MARC editor in Leap. But it's pretty bare, so you'll probably just want to copy existing bibliographic records or templates if you need to create a new one. So from the Find tool, we now have the ability to search for bibliographic templates. So you can find any of your templates or the ones that are owned by CCS. So I'm logged into my CCS account at the CCS branch so I can see the CCS ones and Crystal Lake. I've just brought up the PS5 template. I'm going to open that template. So if you wanted to copy any of our existing templates, this is really easy to do. You can search for them by looking for the type of format. And as I demonstrated, if you use those asterisks as a wildcard, and if you're looking for something like a PS5 template, you can do an asterisk before and after PS5, and you'll see that. So you can see our existing templates have the information saying that it is a PS5 template in the record already. You can then copy it and click Actions and then press Copy. So the template owner can change to your library. I'm just going to make it my username for now. But the owner here, this needs to stay as Cooperative Computer Services with SYS in parentheses, because this will become the bibliographic records owner. And this allows all libraries to share bibliographic records. Then you would just press save to save the template. I'm going to close out that and return to my results to go back to the Find tool. You also have the ability to create a bibliographic record template from an existing bibliographic record. So I'm going to switch to a bibliographic record search, and I will search for an early learning kit. Got a number of local records that come up here. And I'll just click on this one from Niles. So it looks like Niles has several records for early learning kits here. So with a bibliographic record open, if you want to create a template from this record, you can open the Actions drop-down menu and click on Create Template. There's also a button to copy, so this would just copy the bibliographic record, not create the template. So to create the template, you would press Create Template and give the template a name. So I'll just call this Early Learning Kit. And I have my username set as the template owner and press save. It's fairly easy to do. So I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions about what I demonstrated so far? If I go too fast, let me know.
Rachel, there is one question about the printers. I think it might have come in between ours. How does this work if
Okay.
you log into Leap on different computers that are connected to different types of receipt printers?
That's a good question. I think we'll have to do some more research into that and possibly some testing.
Erin, I'm also going
Um,
through the Polaris documentation right now, and I'll take a look to see if they have anything listed. If not, we will continue to do testing and reach out with that information.
yeah, I think you may need to have different workstation names set up for the different receipt printers then, so that they have different settings. We do have access also in system administration settings for CCS staff to help you set up the printer settings specifically at our workstation, I think. So we'll have to look into that some more. Any questions on bibliographic record templates? Okay, the next thing on my list is to review the import profiles. We now have the ability to create and edit import profiles in Leap. So right now, the Mark import settings under utilities are still functioning as Express import. So if you click on a profile to use when importing, that means that the only settings in the Mark import setup that you can change are that display and pack setting and the record set settings. So if you do want to make a change before you import something, like using full import in the client, you need to search for the import profile. So the types of changes you may want to use would be if you're using the item records tab to edit or update or create item records when you import your records. So this is more commonly used for the libraries that do not use Polaris for acquisitions or for the libraries that use EDI enrichment. So to do this, you would need to open the Find tool and search for an import profile. And I'm just going to search for our templates that we have for you to copy. One of the things that I was just thinking I use import profiles for that require me to make a change is when I import something that needs to correct an existing record, like if I'm correcting accidental merges. So then I change it to match a different match point. So to do that, I would just click on the import profile I need to use and edit the setting and then press save. So sometimes I would need to change the duplicate detection settings. So I would click on use profile defined duplicate detection settings, and I might want to do something like match the incoming 001 to the existing 001 to match the control number from the training database to overlay it over the production database. Or you may want to match the existing OCLC number from OCLC to one in the record to just make a correction. So that would be something you could do here and press save. So then you'd be able to go back to mark import and use that profile to import the file. If you want to copy an existing template, now this was something that would be used for our new libraries mostly, but if you do need to make a copy for any reason, you can do that from that import profile that I just showed you. So I'll open up our template to copy record. This is under actions, and you just press copy. You can change the name of your new profile. And press save. So you would also want to make sure you check out the record set settings so that you change those to the ones that match your library. You can add your library's name to it and then press save. So it's not exactly the same workflow as the client, but it's got the functionality that was missing. Are there any questions now about import profiles? Or the bibliographic record templates? Okay, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. We're going to move on to the acquisitions functions. So there's some really interesting new acquisitions functions that have been added, and I know many of you have been waiting for these. So I'm going to provide a brief overview like I did for cataloging, and I'll be going more in depth into these functions and how they fit within your workflows during the acquisitions webinar in March. So for those of you that have ASN and or EDI, all EDI processing functions will be fully operational with this upgrade. This is not something that I can test in training since I don't place any orders, so I will be looking for staff willing to do QA testing on these functions after the production upgrade. One of the more exciting new functions will help streamline the importing process. Supplier records now have import settings for an FTP connection, which stands for File Transfer Protocol, to the vendor. So this will allow vendors to send Polaris files of records directly to the database, so you won't have to download a file from their website and import the file. This will save some extra steps. So these two new functions are also not something that I can test right now in training, and we'll have to do some QA testing with volunteers in production after that upgrade. So there are also several new acquisitions features that may be useful to you, but aren't as exciting as those two that we now have. So these include checking for duplicate segments in the PO and the ability to copy an invoice. There's also some additional links between records that could be useful, like the links between the bib and item records to the POs and invoices. And as I also mentioned, that ability to create and edit the bibliographic record templates could also be useful to the acquisition staff. I'm going to bring back the browser 1 second. So you may already be familiar with the location of EDI processing. I've showed you where it's going to be located before. So it is in Utilities and at EDI processing. So there are now 2 fully functional tabs. It lands on the ASN processing tab. So if you have ASN, you would scan your barcode into the scan your barcode box and then click on that arrow icon. Then you would be able to receive the carton. Can't do the best demonstration of it since I don't have any orders. It also allows you to print a work slip. At the top, there's also the options to filter by branch and date range. The Process Invoices tab is useful for anyone with EDI. After you process your ASN carton, you can then automatically generate your invoice from this Process Invoices tab. You can search by the branch and date range. This is also where you will be able to process any partial shipments that were not able to be processed automatically. So if you know you have received all of your boxes, you can come in here and generate that invoice. Are there any questions on the EDI processing functions? Okay, I don't see any questions. I'm going to move on to the next topic. Okay, so the next one I think is pretty exciting feature to add, so it'll save you some time of downloading your files from the vendor and uploading them. So this is a new setting that you'll find in your supplier records. I'm going to open up an old supplier record. I'll just search for an old Baker and Taylor record that no one's using anymore. Forgot the asterisk. So I'll just open up this first one here. So there is now a new tab in all of your supplier records called Mark Import. So you'll need to work with your vendors to set up the FTP folders on their side and then add the settings to the supplier record on your end. You would then press New. So you can actually set up more than one FTP import setting for each vendor because you can have separate MARC directories. So for example, if you are a library that happens to be ordering books and AV from the same supplier, you could have a separate import profile that's set up here for your books and a separate one for AV. Or if you're one of the libraries that are going to be setting up EDI enrichments with Ingram and you're going to be getting both your on-order records and then your final records to update your on-order records to the final records, you can set up your separate profiles for both the on-order records and EDI enrichment. So for each of these different MARC import profiles, you will just need a different MARC directory so that you can have separate import profiles linked to your supplier record. So you would add in your FTP address, username, password, separate profiles will have separate marked directories, and then you can set up a frequency. It can automatically import your files daily, hourly, or continuously. You can also turn it off by clicking on Never. And if you do daily, you can select a specific time. It does not allow you to select a time for hourly or continuously. So once you have your FTP address settings set up, you would then click on Find to select your import profile. But to make sure there's a difference between those import profiles, again, you do need a separate MARC directory. And the vendor has to set that up for you so that you have your EDI enrichment files going to one directory and your on order files going to another directory, or your book files in one and AV in the other. So are there any questions about these new settings?
No questions in the chat as of right now.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next ones I need to demonstrate are related to purchase orders and invoices. So I'm going to search for a purchase order. I just found an old one and wrote down a number. 1 second. Oh, I forgot to change the database drop-down menu to purchase order. So this is an old order that was still in the training database in a pending state. And the next new feature is the ability to check for duplicate line items. So this is under the Actions drop-down menu. You would click on Duplicate Check. And a list will come up of all of your past purchase order line items for the same item so that you can just see that they exist. However, if you are one of the libraries that likes to purge old purchase orders and invoices, this information will not be retained and available, so you would not be able to see the duplicate purchase order line items if the purchase order has already been purged. And the next significant function is the ability to copy invoices. I'm not sure if this is useful for you or if you've ever used a feature like this in the client. I'm going to search for a sample invoice. And I'll just use an owner for CCS to find one of my test invoices that I created. So what this does is that it just copies the information on the details tab. So that would include the owner and the supplier, but does not copy any line items. So under the Actions drop-down menu for the invoice, you would press Copy, and you can see that it's copied the number, the owner, and the supplier. So when I press Save and navigate to the line items, there are no line items. So I'm not sure how useful this is. It wouldn't really save you much time compared to just creating a new invoice. And the last feature that I'd like to show off is the ability to link from the bibliographic records and item records to the purchase orders and invoices. So I'm going to open up a bibliographic record for a book that has a lot of copies on it. So this is a bit different than in the client. As you're probably starting to get familiar with it, we've got a lot of different tabs here. and the views are a bit different. So to link from the to link from the bibliographic record to the purchase orders and invoices, we have tabs that list all of the purchase orders and invoices that are linked to the bibliographic record. It'll probably be more useful to you to go from one of your item records. This will go directly to Polly. So I'm going to open up one of the item records. And instead of having tabs here, this isn't a links drop-down menu. So the design is not quite consistent, but you'll get used to it. So we've got a link directly to an invoice line item and to a purchase order line item. And now it's fairly easy to go back and forth between the different records as you're navigating through Leap. So I know I went through everything pretty quickly today, and there's a lot more coming in the webinars because there's a lot more details that I can share. So each of those will be an hour, but I've scheduled them for an hour and a half just in case we need extra time to go a bit slower and answer any additional questions. So there'll be separate cataloging and acquisitions webinars in March that you can register for on L2.
All right, I'm going to jump in, Rachel, if you don't mind, and just get some answers to those questions we had in the chat. I responded to the comments, but just making sure that everyone gets to see the answer. We had a question about what if we want the item to stay in the display location. So like I said, when you check an item back in, it's going to revert back to that original location. I went through the documentation and Polaris does not have information on how to keep the display location after it's been checked in. So I will go ahead and open a ticket with their support staff to learn if this functionality is possible or if it's coming at a later upgrade. So that was a great question. Thank you to the couple people who asked that question. We had a question about what permissions do you need to change the locations for these shelf displays, and staff will need the item editing permission in order to change display location. Let me keep scrolling. There was a question about if there's a character limit to these notes, and I stand corrected. There is a limit. It's 4,000 characters. However, Polaris documentation does not state if there's a total limit on how many notes can be added to a preaching record. So if you ever meet that limit, it would be possible to just add a second note. All right, and I think the last thing that came up, and if there's anything else that I missed, please come off chat, stay after, or drop another comment. But the last question was, can you create a record set with item records that will go onto a display and then bulk update the shelf location? And then once those items are checked back in, will the shelf location return to the original shelf location? So for example, can I bulk upload items to go to the spring display? And when checked in, will those go back to youth fiction? The answer is yes. I created a item record set. I then bulk updated their shelf location to that spring display that we had set up. And once I checked any of those items in from the record set, the shelf location reverted back to youth fiction. So you can do it that way. I'm gonna pause, making sure I answered all the questions that I didn't have answers to. If there are any additional questions following up those answers, please feel free to drop them in the chat, come off mute, and I can help you through those. While I wait for that, I just wanted to talk through some additional resources. Again, you'll be upgrading to 8.0 on March 23rd. The upgrade should take a couple hours, so we're going to be doing it overnight. It'll start at 10 p.m. It'll take 2 to 3 hours so that there's no impact to staff and patron experience. During this time, Leap and all the related applications will be down. So if for whatever reason you're trying to log in to Leap at 10 p.m. on March 23rd, you will not be able to. I will go ahead and upload this recording to our YouTube page so you can have access to all of the information as well as the chat so you will be able to pull up all those answers and see what came up during the conversation. And I wanted to link out these Polaris documentation. So this is a documentation created by Polaris, the webinars created by Polaris to talk about the 7.8, 8.0 upgrades that we are working through in March. Next slide, please, Rachel.
One second.
The last thing is if you could take a few minutes to complete our training evaluation form, it'll be very useful to know what you found useful for this session from this session and what you want to learn more about. So as of right now, if you have any questions, please feel free to come off mute, drop a question in the chat, and Rachel and I will stay over to work through any answers for those questions. If you're all set, thank you for joining us today, and please reach out to us at help@ccslib.org with any thoughts, questions, or concerns that may come up. I do want to flag one last thing is that we are unable to send out emails right now. Our emails are currently down, so we will ideally have a follow-up email for you soon. We'll reach out with these slides and any additional links that you may have. I also am keeping a note that we would like a sample ticket email so that we know how to request those display locations. And once we're able to send out emails, I'll send that out. I think Julie requested that. Thank you for requesting. That's a great idea. If you have any questions, please open a help desk ticket. We'll be able to respond to you there. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great day. Danny, I just saw your comment. We will link it out in our follow-up email when you get it, oh, you know what? I'll send it L2 and you should be able to receive that. So hopefully you'll get that soon. All right. I am going to stop recording.